beliefs? I mean, mainly beliefs are these structures. They're relational structures between different bits of data, if you like. They're generalizations about causes and effects and meanings. So that's our basic structure for beliefs. This seems, again, to be a natural human thing, that we have some kind of natural way of thinking about cause and effect, that we structure our logic and our cognitive world in terms of cause-effect kind of structures. This happened, so that caused this, and this happened, so that, so well, I will expect it to cause that. And a lot of these very interesting things about, cause effects are, of course, us asking the question, did that really cause that? Is it more of a correlation? Did that person really make you angry? Is that not a sort of a complete distortion? So in other words, to say, for example, you made me angry, is to say a whole bunch of things like, I have no choice over my own, this thing happens on the outside of me, and I have absolutely no choice about my response. So in other words, as soon as someone has made you angry, or made you cry, or made you whatever, it's about your own map. It's about your own, they switched, like an anchor is like a switch, isn't it? They switch something on, this thing, you have then switched on a deeply kind of neuro-linguistically programmed kind of reaction to it. That's what that means. And yet it's something that we automatically do. If this happens and this happens, oh, there's a complete causal connection between them. That's why in statistics and things, this whole idea of causation and correlation is so absolutely, massive. It's so important. Yes, these things may have happened sequentially, they may have happened simultaneously, but are they causal? And I think for us, always sort of questioning that, well, what's causing things? The other issue of this, of course, is the whole issue of the relationship of causality. What will this cause? What will this lead to? So that will come up in a moment, but one of the, one of the big pieces of research that was done in some of this was Bandura linked the idea of performance and expectation. So in other words, linked something that was very measurable and quantifiable and, objectified by different perspectives to something that was completely about the map of something, people's expectations. And I expect you all already know things like that, an amazing experiment that has been replicated many times about having, 3 classes of children, and one teacher is told she's been given above average, they've all got above average scores, and another teacher's been told they've all got below average scores, and the rest is a kind of neutral control average score kids. So all these kids have got the same scores. At the end of the school year, the expectation on these children, they had all performed above where they had been. These had performed below, and these had stayed the same because of the teacher's expectations. Now, this very, very interesting thing, causation, what will this lead to? What invisible, intangible, feelingful map am I making of what am I expecting, even if I'm not aware of it? Bandura did all these sort of amazing things about, just very, very, people handled snakes, and they did maths problems, and they did all kinds of amazing things. And they were saying, how well did you do compared with how well you thought you'd do? And then what did you make of that? What's the meaning that you made of that? Because some people go, well, some of it was like throwing paper into a bin or something. So say you're doing it 10 times. If you go 10 times, they go, oh, that was just lucky. So you get people who are discounting. Oh, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean I can build on a skill. That was just a one-off. or you know, so it's like, what's the meaning that you're going to make of these things? So that comes up in you know, in beliefs. So we've got this idea that beliefs are generalizations about causation. They're about meaning. What is giving things meaning? They're about boundaries in the world around us, in our capabilities, in our identities. This is where these words like must, ought to, should come up, or can't, impossible come up. And then we've got this, I've got like a little map. These are possibly not quite in the right order, but let me show you. So here's our little map, which is a wonderful map of Robert Diltson's The Metastructure of Beliefs, where you've got a kind of belief, and it's linked to a positive intention, which is we're going to spend some time going, what is the positive intention of the belief? Why is somebody holding this belief? What is it serving? What's the value of it and the value that's driving it? So in other words, this is a belief that is related. The beliefs are built around these values in these sorts of ways. Wait a minute, I've got another, which is not in the another diagram. This wonderful, wonderful values diagram, which is here. So this gives you the cause effects and the complex equivalencies. Do say if you already know all of this. Is this useful to kind of take us through the kind of basics again? So this is a value, and then here are the kind of things, well, what causes that? So say it's something like success. What causes success? You say, well, some people might go hard work, some people might go luck, some people might go, you know, having good parents. You know, I mean, there's lots of things that people might say causes success. And then, of course, if you have that belief, so what's the difference between people who go luck causes success and hard work causes success? Is you've got two different lives in that one, you know, that one capturing of a cause-effect statement. That is, behavior comes out of that. These are very abstract beliefs, but basically they're how we live our lives, what we'll commit our energy to, what will keep us going on things. You know, if I think my hard work will eventually pay off, I'm much more likely to do that than to kind of go, oh, well, I'll just buy another bunch of lottery tickets or something. I'm not saying either is the right way, by the way, because who knows, you know. But so then you go, what does it lead to? So this is a consequence or an expectation in my model of the world. Very, very interesting thing about luck, which is also about belief. I'm sure people know the research that Richard Wiseman did about luck. And he was interviewing people, and he had two groups of people that he asked them to self-select. And he had a group of people who self-selected as lucky and unlucky, and he got them to come to an interview with him. But on the pathway, he put a £20 note. Yeah. And all the people who self-described themselves as lucky saw it. And all the people who self-described themselves as unlucky didn't see it. So it tells you something about kind of, you know, the magic of these sorts of frames. So basically, this is a definition. What is that then? What is success to you? What's your definition of it? What is it? This is like more of a complex equivalence. What's the meaning of it? What's the meaning of that to you? Then this is more the evidences. How do you know? What are you using as evidence? Because some people might use a feeling as evidence. Some people might use a bank statement as evidence. Some people might use the size of, well, people do. Kind of, you know, the boy with the most toys at the end wins kind of thing, you know. That's how I know I'm successful, because I've traded up, you know, 8 wives and, you know, several Lamborghinis and, you know, private islands and, you know, that's how I know to fill the emptiness inside. I say that obviously without any valuation. So this starts to give you the meta-model patterns. Notice that there's always and always, even if people don't say it, because that's what a generalization is. This goes through contexts, unless people specifically say it doesn't, or you specifically elicit that from people, that there are contexts in which this is not valid, this statement is not valid and does not hold up anymore. So then this is the metastructure of beliefs, where you've got a kind of belief, it leads to these sort of expectations and potential for things like self-efficacy. You know, self-efficacy is this sort of belief that you have the capabilities to learn and be successful at things. This is the sort of more experiential part of the belief. What's it actually based on? These are the kind of positive intentions of the belief, and this is obviously a state. You can see, can't you? You can feel it and sense it for yourself when you're in the kind of state where you go, everyone loves me and nobody loves me, or I'm being extreme here, but those kind of things where you maybe fall into a little ditch of our own making, and you suddenly go, hang on a minute, I don't normally have these sorts of thoughts, you know, I've kind of plummeted into, you know, somewhere, I've lost my centre in some way. That's a good cue to bring it up, but there's definitely a different state, and in fact, different states trigger different beliefs trigger different states, this whole map changes. Now, one of the interesting things in Robert's work as well is this idea of a thought virus, which is so brilliant, such a brilliant, brilliant idea. It's like, and basically what a thought virus is, it's where the connection between your own experiences and evidence has been lost. And there's some very interesting research. I've heard different kind of versions of this, but I mean, this is the one that I'll produce this morning, which is this idea of, and again, you may have heard this experiment that they put like 6 monkeys in a cage, and there's a, sorry, Simon. It was a very nice cage. There was armchairs, there were televisions, there was cooked food, there were toys. And what they do is they have this little staircase, and there's like a banana at the top. And so the monkeys obviously, you know, see the banana go up there, and they get hosed with water. So very soon, guess what? All 6 monkeys see the banana, but it's like what we say, I'm not going there. Don't go there. I'm not going there. Because it's like bad. It's bad over there. Now, the interesting thing that happens in this experiment is that they took one of these monkeys out.
Who dried it?
Yes, and blue dried it, and, you know, head and things. And put another monkey who'd never even seen that. Now, the monkey who came into the cage went, hey, you guys, look, they're amazing. There's a banana on the steps. They kind of got there. And all the other monkeys go, oh, oh, oh. They're all making fear noises, pulling him back, making sure he can't get there. He goes, you know, WTF, you know. But he soon learns, he can't, you know, goes there, and there's this huge reaction. So in other words, you've got this kind of mirror neuron stuff going on. You've got this kind of reaction coming into the system, as well as this observable learned behavior. And bit by bit, they take out all the original monkeys and put in new ones. And so there's 6 monkeys there, in the end, who have never been squirted with water, and they won't go near the banana. If I was a vicar, I would just say, you know, how like us all today. You know, I recognise I have things like that, where I go, there's no real reason why I don't do that. Do you ever have those breakthrough moments where you go, well, why don't I? Why have I never been there, or done that, or said this, or enjoyed X, Y, and Z? You know, and this is this kind of family culture kind of system where you kind of go, you know, like 100 years ago, someone in my family, you know, this happened to them, and so none of us have ever done it. We don't know why. To us, it's just kind of normal. And this is this idea that there's no actual direct sensory experience. And this, as you know, is one of the key things that we're going for from an NLP point of view. We're trying to tie things into actual, robust kinds of evidences. And there's no evidence. So this comes up in beliefs as well. And this tends to produce some of these very interesting reactions and responses, which again, I think this is such a brilliant kind of list. And I'm sure in your own coaching, you have come across these phenomena in your own coaching as well as in yourselves. Because I think the thing is for us, you know, once you get to this point in your NLP, I know certainly for me, I mean, you're able to have the tools and the experience to reflect on your own, and to become more, bring awareness to more and more of your own experience. So the first one is this idea of a smokescreen. So this is like, here are some of the problems in identifying limiting beliefs in people. These are mainly these kind of unconscious, like weird things. Because it's one thing for somebody to say, oh, I've got a limiting belief, it's X. That is easy peasy. At this level, it's more like it's a puzzle, it's a mystery. It's a mystery to the person. They might not even know that it is a problem because they're just one of those monkeys that never got squirted. You know, this is just how it is. It's a deep assumption about how life is. So the smoke screen is when you're kind of working with somebody and they go very blank and they lose their thread. And it's like a sort of fogging. People suddenly just kind of go, I don't know, where were we? I don't know, I've gone blank. Or, you know, what were you saying? And obviously the positive intention is protection. You know, people are protecting. It's a survival response as much as anything. Because, like, and it is that, don't go there. Because it's dangerous. So it's flagging up. It's a way of the whole mind-body system to flag up a don't go there sign. And of course, it's up to us as the coaches to have that sort of quality of, you know, support and connection and holding that space for somebody to be able to relax and for certain kinds of information to surface in a natural, easy way between you in some way, but we'll come to that. The red herring is an interesting one, and it's when people are very, very, very rational. So in other words, people suddenly go hyper-rational, and they start telling you about their child and go, well, I think this because of this and this and this, and then I think, it's like one of the monkeys kind of going, well, I think this might be the case because, you know, apparently I heard there was a banana that people got squirted with water, but actually I don't think it was really. I think, you know, so it's a bit like that. You see people suddenly sort of come out of this more conscious, unconscious, somatic kind of way of being with you and go quite cognitive. And particularly, and it's a red herring, as you know, in a murder mystery, is when people take you off the path. So in other words, it's something that a clue where you're reading a mystery or you're watching something on the television and you become obsessed with it's all about, it's going to all hinge on this. But that's just been thrown in to the works to take you off the track. So the same thing, positive intention, is much more to do with protection. Fish in the dreams is a thing, and actually I heard David Gordon explain this the best. He said, you know, there was a radio program when he was a child growing up, and It was a mad psychiatrist, you know, who thought everybody had fish in their dreams. And so he would say, so he would get people to say, tell me your dreams, you know. And people go, well, I was walking down the street, like, were there any fish in the street? No, there weren't any fish in the street. Okay, what be so you were walking by, so then said, had it rained? I don't know. Well, it might have rained. So there could have been a puddle. Well, I guess there might have been a puddle. And was there a fish in that puddle? I don't know. There could have been fish in the puddle. Just as I thought. So this is obviously primarily about projection. And as we all know, in the last 20 years, the biggest example of this that we have in the therapeutic field is the whole kind of false memory, child sexual abuse kind of things. A couple of programs, not very good programs. In fact, I read a rebuttal to David Aronovich's programs on the radio. But there was a big thing, especially in the 90s. And in fact, it was the same with Freud. I don't know whether you know. I mean, at one point, I actually have a book, a pile of books about this high on false memory syndrome and the whole kind of, yes, Muriel kind of goes, oh my God, you know, I am that nerve. Because even Freud did this. You know, Freud listened to all his clients. And they started telling him about being sexually assaulted by their fathers or friends of their fathers or whatever. And he was absolutely horrified and did that. Then he thought, this is a very simplistic, facile way of putting this, really, but anyway. And then he sort of decided, as it were, his next theory was that this was sort of projection and fantasy. And so it was a wish rather than real truth. So this whole issue of what's happened, why are people having these things? But at one point, certainly in the States, there were certain therapists who were doing fish in the dreams. You know, you've got this problem, you were abused. You've got this problem, you were abused. You've got this problem, you were abused. Well, actually, a lot of people have been abused. So I'm not sort of saying that's a terrible thing, but it was like they were really, really going, I know what's happened to you on the basis of this. This is what's happened. So this is about being careful ourselves, really, not to think that we really know what's happened, because we don't really know. We don't even really know what's happened in our own lives, let alone other people's. Because of memory being constructive and reconstructive, everything, our own personal history even, it kind of maps and models sufficiently, you know, useful to us and meaningful to us. And then there's this idea of critical mass, and the idea of that is that it's, I suppose the most common phrase that we have is that there's a straw that breaks the camel's back. It's a very unpleasant image, really. But we sort of say, the last straw, you know, that was the last straw. And the idea of that is there isn't in NLP or anything else some magical, one technique, breakthrough for all time thing that works with every single person. Very often what you're doing is you're kind of layering and working in this kind of artistic way with kind of what's happening in people's maps and models of the world. And then sometimes the very last thing that people do, they go, oh, this is the magic thing. You know, this is the magic thing. If only you'd done this at the beginning of our sessions, you know, I wouldn't have had to come 12 times or whatever, or 3 times, or however long you see people for, 5 years. You know, as Erickson saw somebody every year for their lives, pretty much. You know, it's not, there isn't really a time, there's only a result, and when you get to it and the sort of application of things. And then these are the kinds of issues which touch into this whole idea of there's helpless, hopeless, worthless, basically. So this is helpless, you don't really feel you've got the capability. You see that it's possible, but you feel helpless around it. You see other people could do it even, but you feel like you can't. Hopeless is when you just don't even see it's a possibility. And actually, I had meant to bring an amazing interview from the Granyard this week, and it was some quotes from a young person in a job centre or something. It was basically just saying, what's the point? What is the point? I won't be able to do it. There's nothing out there for me. Etc., etc. Some of which, of course, is based in truth, but the sort of the utter hopelessness of it, that really there was no point for him in actually doing anything. There wasn't anything that was ever going to change anything. And that, of course, is how people feel when they, kill themselves or, make very, very bad choices or very, very destructive kinds of choices. And, of course, worthless, that somehow I myself, there's something about me. This is these beliefs at identity level. This is much more a belief about my capabilities. This is much more a belief about the world, that it's hopeless. This thing doesn't even exist out there. This is much more at identity level, that I am worthless. I don't even deserve to do well. I don't belong. There's nothing special about me. I'm just that kind of person. I'm unlucky. It's like the label that people went into the interview with. I'm unlucky. So you're dealing with things at different levels, of course. And I know there's so much I could say, but I'm trying to kind of keep it zipping along. Is it okay? Am I going roughly the right kind of pace through? So this, I think, is a fantastic list. Updating and transforming beliefs. These 5 really, really interesting things. One is to find the positive intention. What's this value and intention that's keeping this belief kind of going? Because it's being organised to support a value. There's nothing in itself wrong with the value, but the meanings and causes and expectations that have got set up in the map are no longer helpful. You say, well, it was helpful maybe at one time, but no longer. I think what are sort of key assumptions that people are making? Now, this is the monkey issue, because people won't even say, well, it's like this, apparently I heard the previous monkeys, this happened to them. That's why I'm a bit scared. They just it's just like that's normal. So this is where advanced use of these skills are so helpful, because we're kind of testing what is it that we want to kind of see and hear and sense from a client that lets us know they've kind of broken out of the whole world of this kind of banana and squishing, and they're free. They're free, they're kind of back up in the jungle canopy, having a great time, having a great life again. Because we've kind of found our way back. We've found our way back to an outcome frame, feedback frame, possibility and choice frame. Suddenly you kind of see, yes, we've done it. They're back in a world where things are possible, where they're reconnected to their own resources, where they're willing and able to try things out and be able to kind of evaluate that feedback in a positive kind of way. They're outcome-oriented rather than problem-oriented, etc. So looking at what are the assumptions that are being made, what is happening in these widening the perception of these cause-effect kind of chains, and also these meaning, like the meanings of things. And again, on practitioner, playing around a lot with, well, what does it mean? Could it mean anything else? Can you move? I mean, one of, I think, the things about being more of an advanced practitioner is that there's a kind of mobility of the way you attribute meaning, isn't there? Have you found that NLP has helped you move meanings around and be curious and go, well, it might mean this, or it might mean that, or I'm wondering if this. You're finding increasingly that you bring a curiosity to the way that you're attributing meaning to different kinds of behaviors and experiences, that you're able to kind of, have a lot of flexibility with that. Sometimes belief issues are to do with missing how-tos. And this is a very, very interesting issue, the thing that pops into my mind actually, I don't know whether you saw ages and ages ago, Jamie Oliver, who I do really, really like. He did this thing, did you watch his programs that were set in Rotherham? He did this kitchen thing that was set in, you saw them, yeah. They were fantastic, because what he did was, he went, obviously it was all reality TV, and it was all set up and telling a story and all this kind of shit. But basically, he found one of the people that I really remember from that. He found this she was a young single mum. She had bought herself, she had saved up and bought herself a beautiful 6-ring cooker. And she and her child were living on takeaways because she couldn't cook. It's such an amazing, it's just kind of incredible. I'm sure, I hope you've all got examples of that for yourselves in some way. You kind of go, I've somehow been drawn to this, but I don't know how to. I don't really know anything about it. And he had this most fantastic, she went on a journey, like people were supposed to on reality TV. But it was a kind of very touching and wonderful journey because she literally was a bit like this boy that I was quoting from The Guardian. She was literally kind of panic-struck because of having to kind of face these feelings about being worthless, hopeless, helpless. I don't want to go there. I don't want to feel like that. As soon as I'm in this context, I feel fine unless you ask me to cook. And then I am completely full of all this stuff about how useless I am and how my life is never going to work out. So this is this kind of contextual beliefs that crop up. Anyway, he did very, very carefully, gradually teach. And of course, she was absolutely brilliant. Her somehow unconscious intuition. She was a brilliant natural cook, but getting people through that, this is that Bandura model that Robert has, idealized, which is like, what's the process of learning something? And the process of learning something, at the beginning, I'm now in this kind of diagram, which some of you may see in your mind's eye, but here I'm kind of at the latent, you start doing something, you've never done it before. Sometimes you have a lot of latent, what's called latent capability, and it pops out, and you're kind of a little bit better than you thought you were. So this is where Bandura's work comes in. Because I was better than I thought I was, I then project a kind of pathway of my learning. But of course, learning isn't always like that. Learning don't always go smoothly. As you know, anyone who's learned to sort of dance or something like that, there are those terrible moments where you're just stomping on everybody's feet and falling over. And so your actual performance often lags behind the expectations that you've set. And so at certain critical moments, there's a gap between how you thought you were going to do and how you're actually now doing. It happens with weight loss, it happens with lots and lots and lots of things. And it's in that critical gap that there's a kind of trial and error, and you need certain kinds of support in order to close the gap between your actual performance and your expectation. And hopefully you close them so you end up where you were. But it's at this moment where the discrepancy between how well you thought you'd be doing by now and how well you're actually doing, this performance and expectation kind of comparison where it's at its widest. And that's where this idea of having certain kinds of tools and support, and the tools and support obviously change through the thing. I mean, Bandura is very funny, and that he goes, cheerleading is great when people are first starting off. You go, yeah, you can do it. I believe in you. At this point of the biggest mismatch between, kind of observable performance here and how you thought you would have done, you don't want any cheerleading anymore. People go, you can do it, I believe in you. Yeah, get over it, I'm really, really struggling. I don't need that anymore. I need a bit more kind of this sort of how-to type information. Otherwise, what happens is that people's expectation and belief drops below where they were at the beginning. So in other words, not getting the right kind of tools and support at certain critical stages on a learning pathway can actually regress people below where they were. And I'm sure you know people and you've been those people. We kind of go, well, I started learning things with high hopes, we say, don't you? In other words, I had set my expectation. I was really looking forward to be able to do this absolutely marvellously. And then as it turned out, I had 2 left feet or whatever, couldn't quite get there in time. And so then, maybe then what happens to people is I say, why did I ever think I'd do that? Why did I ever think I'd be any good at that? I'm just so useless. It just kind of then, you start to confirm. It becomes part of the self-fulfilling prophecy confirmation bias for then, performing, not having any hopes, going into sort of hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, deeper and deeper. And the young people that I've mentioned, the one from The Guardian, but also this girl from Jamie Oliver's course, you could see their lives had been a kind of, the expectation, every time they tried something, the expectation gets lower and lower. The things they try get fewer and fewer. There's a diminished set of even things that you think you'll have a go at, until the whole thing just kind of extinguishes. And the other thing is to uptake key relationships, because, and this is where particularly I feel Robert Dilts's key work in...
I just have a question.
Can I just carry on? Yeah, and ask at the end. His key work on sort of reimprinting, this idea of that you've unconsciously role modeled, we now know through mirror neurons, we take in, like the monkeys did, we just take in without thinking. It's not a cognitive process, it's a somatic, unconscious process. We take in certain kind of beliefs, or things happen and we make them mean something. Maybe our parents never intended for us to get that message out of that, but we did. We got that message. They made their positive intention, like people, parents who are very, very critical. What's the positive intention? I want my child to have a great life. I want them to do really well. I want them to be really happy. The child, meanwhile, is going, I hear this, you're no good, you're no good, you're no good. I always remember there was a fantastic program once, years ago, I'd love to see it again, and it was a series of, through the mirror and people with earpieces. And it was actually up at our local hospital up at the Maudsley in the child psychology clinic. And it was this young boy, he was Welsh actually, his name was Andrews. It imprinted in my brain, this whole thing. And they were getting his mum to play with him, and she had a little earpiece in. And there was a little garage and things, little cars and things like that. And everything she said was, oh, you don't want to do that. He would do something and she would mismatch. Everything he did, she would mismatch. And so the person on the other end, well, let me first of all say they had this interview with this little boy, which again, I've never forgotten. And they said, Andrew, would you say you're a happy boy or a sad boy? He was only about 4. He went, I'm a sad boy. I know, don't you just want to cry? And it was his mum really loved him, he wasn't being beaten or abused in any way. But so there's his mum, and everything she's mismatching to what he's doing all the time. And so through the earpiece, they say, no, say, oh, that's lovely, Andrew. Oh, what a good idea that is. Oh, yes, let's. This is what we're going to do in our theatre skills thing in the next one. We're going to take this thing from Second City First, the Chicago, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, everyone kind of thing. They go, yes, and. This is what Erickson did, yes, and. But anyway, that's sort of over there in a way. But so this is just this idea of re-imprinting and going, how can you update these unconscious beliefs about your identity that you have picked up through the modeling, mirror neuron type somatic field, influence of parents and significant others as you were growing up. As I say, it may not at all have been what they meant. And there's always a positive intention there. And one of the things is in this sort of layout where you do re-imprinting is you surface the values and intentions in something.